Welcome back, guys, to Battleground Stories. 80% of you still haven't subscribed. Before we start the video, hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second. There was one thing clearly stated in the mission briefing we received. What we heard, you were not supposed to hear. Operation Night Harvest was nothing more than a rest stop. In 1967, deep in the Amazon rainforest, where satellite signals were blocked and the nearest military base was 300 miles away. What was asked of us was simple. Monitor the traffic on Soviet radios, jam communications, and report anything unusual to command. Captain Elias Kane was wrong, because he had told us this would be a routine mission. You couldn't find the base on any map. The base's coordinates changed with every briefing, as if command was trying to forget we existed. 37 men worked in shifts in a prefabricated facility surrounded by razor wire and motion sensors. The forest pressured us every hour of the day, enveloping us like a living green wall that breathed moisture from everywhere. We couldn't prevent our equipment from rusting. When you smelled the air, you could sense the density of decaying plants around you. Worst of all was the noise. Oh God, the noise never stopped. Birds chirping, insects screeching, and heavy things constantly moving in the bushes. The forest noise had left our third location in silence. I remember the exact moment. 03:47 hours, October 12th. I was on night watch with Corporal Andrew Dalton, call sign Sparks. He sat hunched over the radio console, headphones clamped tight, fingers dancing across dials. The equipment hummed steady, filling the comm room with electronic static. Then Sparks froze. His hand hovered over a frequency knob, trembling. "You hear that?" he whispered. I leaned closer. Through the white noise came something else, rhythmic, pulsing like a heartbeat transmitted through deep space. "Interference?" I asked. Sparks shook his head slowly. "No, this is deliberate. Someone's broadcasting on a frequency that shouldn't exist." He adjusted the settings and the sound grew clearer. Not a heartbeat. Multiple heartbeats, layered, syncopated, beating in patterns that made my chest tighten. Then came the voices. Not words, not language, just human-like echoes that rose and fell like a tide. My stomach twisted. "Get Kane," Sparks said, eyes wide. "Get him now." Captain Elias Kane arrived in under 2 minutes, uniform buttoned despite the hour, jaw set in that iron discipline that made him impossible to read. He listened for 30 seconds, face unchanging. Then he keyed the internal comms. "All personnel, alert status Bravo. Sergeant Moreira to comm room immediately." Sergeant Luis Moreira was our guide, a Brazilian army liaison who'd grown up in villages along the Amazon tributaries. He understood the jungle in ways we never could, respected it, feared it. When he entered the comm room and heard the transmission, his face went pale. "Turn it off," he said quietly. Kane's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "There are stories," Moreira said, voice tight. "Old stories. About sounds in the deep forest. Sounds that pull you in. You listen too long. You start walking toward them. You don't come back." Sparks pulled the headphones off fast, like they'd burned him. But the sound continued through the speakers, filling the room. The heartbeats pulsed faster now, overlapping until they became a single droning rhythm. The voices underneath grew louder, almost forming words. Kane stared at the console. "Can you trace the source?" Sparks hesitated, then nodded. "Triangulation will take time. But yeah, if it's close enough." "Do it," Kane ordered. "I want coordinates by 0600. The rest of the night crawled by. Sparks worked the equipment, sweat dripping from his face despite the air conditioning. Moreira paced near the door, muttering prayers under his breath. I stood watch, rifle ready, scanning the perimeter through the window. The motion sensors stayed quiet. The jungle remained silent. That bothered me more than any noise could have. By dawn, Sparks had coordinates. The signal originated 2 kilometers west-southwest, deep in unmapped territory. Kane assembled a recon team. Me, Morera, Private Neil Harper on Overwatch, and Dr. Sofia Rojas, the base biologist who'd been studying soil samples since we arrived. She wasn't military, but Kane insisted. If we found something organic, he wanted answers immediately. We geared up in silence. Standard loadout. M16S, sidearms. Enough ammo to fight our way back if things went wrong. Harper slung his sniper rifle across his back, scope wrapped tight against the humidity. Dr. Rojas carried a field kit and a machete, her expression somewhere between curiosity and dread. Kane gathered us at the gate. Rules of engagement are simple. We observe, we document, we return. No heroics, no assumptions. If this is enemy activity, we report and pull back. Clear? We nodded. But I could see it in everyone's eyes. This wasn't enemy activity. This was something else. The jungle swallowed us within minutes. The canopy overhead blocked the sun, casting everything in dim green twilight. Vines hung like nooses, thick as a man's arm. The ground squelched with every step, releasing gases that made our eyes water. Morera led, machete cutting through undergrowth with practiced strokes. He moved like the forest was an extension of himself, reading signs in broken branches and disturbed soil. Stay tight, he warned. Jungle doesn't forgive mistakes. We pushed west, following Spark's coordinates. The silence continued. No birds, no insects, not even the rustle of small animals fleeing our approach. Just our breathing, our footsteps, and the distant pulse of that transmission bleeding through Spark's portable receiver clipped to his vest. After an hour, Harper raised his fist. We froze. He pointed ahead and I saw it. Shapes in the undergrowth. Tall, thin, evenly spaced. At first, I thought they were trees. Then my vision adjusted. They were structures. Wooden poles, maybe 10 feet high, arranged in a circle around a clearing. Vines covered them, but underneath, I could see carvings, symbols. Not tribal, not military, just geometric patterns that hurt to look at too long. In the center of the circle sat a mound of earth, perfectly round, topped with stones arranged in concentric rings. Dr. Rojas moved forward slowly, eyes wide. This isn't natural. Kane scanned the perimeter. Age? She knelt, brushing soil from one of the stones. Hard to say. Months, maybe years. But the vegetation growth suggests it's been undisturbed for a while. Morera circled the poles, face grim. This is old magic. Older than the tribes I know. We shouldn't be here. Kane ignored him. Sparks? Signal strength? Sparks checked his receiver, face pale. Stronger. Much stronger. Whatever's broadcasting, it's close. Real close. I felt it then. A vibration in my chest, like standing too near a subwoofer. The heartbeat transmission wasn't just sound anymore. It was pressure. Physical and wrong, pushing against my ribcage from the inside. Harper grimaced, pressing a hand to his sternum. Dr. Rojas swayed slightly, eyes unfocused. "Captain," I said, voice tight. "We should pull back." Kane's jaw worked. I could see the calculation behind his eyes. Orders versus instinct. Protocol versus survival. Finally, he nodded. "Mark this location. We're returning to base for additional equipment and personnel." Relief flooded through me. But as we turned to leave, Dr. Rojas gasped. She was staring at the mound, hands shaking. "There's something in the soil." Bones. A lot of bones. Kane's hand went to his sidearm. "What kind?" She crouched, digging carefully with gloved hands. When she pulled the first fragment free, my stomach dropped. It was a rib bone, human-sized, but the structure was wrong. Too porous, too light, with ridges that didn't match any anatomy I'd seen. She kept digging, pulling more pieces free. A femur with joints that bent wrong, vertebrae with too many articulation points. a skull fragment with eye sockets positioned at an angle that made my head hurt. "This isn't human," she whispered. "But it's not animal either. It's something else, something in between." The vibration in my chest intensified. The heartbeat sounds grew louder, no longer coming from Sparks' receiver, but from the mound itself. The stones on top began to hum, resonating with the transmission. Moreira backed away, weapon raised, eyes wide with recognition. "We need to leave," he said urgently. "Now." Kane didn't argue. "Move out." Double time. We ran. The jungle pressed closer, vines reaching like fingers, roots rising to trip us. Behind, the humming grew into a roar, and the ground trembled beneath our boots. I didn't look back. None of us did. We just ran until the base came into view, razor wire gleaming through the trees. At the gate, Kane locked it behind us personally, breath ragged. He keyed the base-wide comms. "All personnel, condition red. No one leaves the perimeter without direct authorization. Sparks, kill that frequency. I don't want to hear it again." But as we stood there, chest heaving, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The jungle was still silent, and underneath that silence, faint but growing, came the heartbeat. Not from the forest, not from the equipment, from inside the base. Kane heard it too. His face went gray. "Secure all entry points. Full lockdown. Nobody sleeps alone tonight." The rest of that day passed intense preparation. We reinforced doors, checked weapons, set additional motion sensors. Dr. Rojas worked in the medical bay, analyzing the bone samples she'd collected. Sparks monitored frequencies, trying to block the transmission. Moreira prayed in his bunk, rosary clutched tight. Harper took position on the watchtower, scanning the jungle through his scope. I stood guard rotation with 3 others, walking the perimeter as daylight faded. The jungle remained silent. No animals, no insects, nothing. Just that oppressive stillness that made every shadow look like movement. When darkness fell, the humidity thickened into fog, creeping over the razor wire like smoke. At 2100 hours, the power flickered. Emergency lights kicked in, bathing everything in red. The generators hummed steady, but the voltage dropped and surged in waves. Sparks' voice crackled over comms. "Captain, the signal's back." "It's not coming from outside anymore. It's coming from our own equipment." Kane's reply was instant. "Shut it down, everything non-essential." But the heartbeat continued, pulsing through walls, vibrating in the metal struts, resonating in our bones. And underneath it, those voices, closer now, almost forming words in a language I didn't recognize, but somehow understood. They were calling, inviting, promising something I couldn't name but desperately wanted. I shook my head hard, trying to clear the fog settling over my thoughts. Beside me, one of the guards, a young private named Mills, lowered his rifle slowly. His eyes glazed, staring toward the jungle. "Mills," I snapped. "Stay sharp." He didn't respond, just stood there, swaying slightly, lips moving soundlessly. I grabbed his shoulder, and he jerked like I'd hit him with voltage. His eyes cleared, terror flooding in. "I heard them," he whispered. "They were inside my head," telling me to open the gate. Before I could respond, motion sensors screamed. Every alarm on the perimeter triggered at once, red lights flashing in sequence. But when I looked at the monitors, nothing appeared. No heat signatures, no movement, just empty jungle and fog. Kane's voice boomed over comms. "All personnel, defensive positions, Harper. What do you see?" Harper's reply came tight. "Nothing, sir." No visual contact. But the fog's moving wrong. It's flowing toward us, against the wind. I raised my rifle, scanning the perimeter. The fog thickened, pressing against the razor wire, curling through the gaps. And within it, shapes. Tall, thin, moving with that same mechanical stiffness I'd seen before. But these weren't soldiers. They were something else entirely. Dr. Rojas' voice cut through the comms, breathless and terrified. "Captain, the bones. They're not fossils. They're fresh, days old at most. And the cellular structure? It's human DNA mixed with something I can't identify, something that shouldn't exist. Kane's voice stayed level, but I heard the edge underneath. Meaning? Meaning whatever made those bones is alive, and it's been taking people, changing them. The fog reached the first building. Lights inside flickered and died. Screams erupted over comms, then cut short. Kane barked orders, deploying teams to every entry point. But the fog moved faster, flowing through vents and under doors, bringing that heartbeat sound with it. I backed toward the comm building, Mills beside me, both of us firing into the fog. Muzzle flashes lit up shapes, silhouettes that jerked and twitched but didn't fall. They moved closer, arms reaching, mouths open in silent screams that mirrored the voices in the transmission. Then Mills stopped shooting. His rifle clattered to the ground. He turned toward the fog, face slack, and started walking. I grabbed him, but his strength was inhuman. He threw me off like I weighed nothing and kept walking. The fog swallowed him in seconds. His scream lasted longer. "Fall back," Kane roared. "Everyone to the comm room, now!" We scrambled, boots slipping on wet metal, the fog chasing us. Morera dragged a wounded soldier, face set in grim determination. Harper fired from the rear, every shot precise but useless. Dr. Rojas ran beside me, clutching her field kit, eyes wild. We sealed the comm room door, stacking equipment against it. 8 of us remained. Kane, Morera, Harper, Sparks, Dr. Rojas, me, and 2 privates I didn't know well. Outside, the base fell silent. No screams, no gunfire, just the heartbeat growing louder, shaking dust from the ceiling. Sparks worked frantically at the console, trying to raise anyone outside the base. Nothing but static and that transmission. Words almost forming now. Syllables that made my teeth ache. Kane pulled us into a tight circle. "Situation is critical. Comms are down. Extraction is impossible until dawn. We hold this position and pray." Morera shook his head. "Prayer won't stop this. We woke something old. Then we put it back to sleep," Kane said flatly. Dr. Rojas spoke up, voice shaking. "The bones, the signal, the fog, it's all connected. This isn't supernatural. It's biological. Some kind of organism that affects neurological function, uses sound to hunt, to control." "Can we kill it?" Kane asked. She hesitated. "Maybe. Fire might work, or severing its connection to the mound, but someone would have to go back out there." Kane's face hardened. "Then that's what we'll do." At first light, we returned to that clearing. We destroy the mound and anything attached to it. No one argued, but I could see it in their eyes. The same thing I felt. We weren't going to make it to dawn. Whatever was outside, it wasn't going to wait. The heartbeat pulsed harder, and the door began to groan. Something was pushing against it. Something strong. The metal bent inward, rivets popping one by one. We raised our rifles, but my hands shook, because through the gap forming in the door, I saw them. The shapes from the fog. Dozens of them. Faces pale and wrong. Eyes clouded. Mouths moving in time with the heartbeat. And at the front, still in his uniform, was Mills. His head tilted back at an impossible angle, jaw slack, but his eyes, God, his eyes were aware, trapped, screaming silently from inside a body that wasn't his anymore. Kane's voice cut through the panic. "Hold the line. Whatever happens, we hold the line." But I knew deep down where instinct lived that holding wasn't going to be enough, because the transmission wasn't trying to break in. It was already inside our heads, inside our bones, inside the very air we breathed. And when I looked around that room, at the faces of soldiers trying desperately to stay human, I saw it. The glaze creeping over their eyes, the sway in their stance, the lips beginning to move soundlessly. We weren't defending against the transmission. We were becoming it. And somewhere in the jungle, in that clearing with the mound and the bones, something ancient and patient waited. because it knew what we were just beginning to understand. The signal wasn't a call for help. It was a call to join. And once you heard it, really heard it, you couldn't unhear it. You could only answer. The door burst open and Mills stepped through. Behind him, dozens more, all wearing faces we recognized. Our brothers, our friends, all gone, replaced by something wearing their skin. Kane fired first, rounds tearing into Mills' chest. He staggered but kept coming, that terrible awareness still burning in his eyes. Then Sparks screamed, hands clamped over his ears, and I knew. The transmission had finally broken through, and we were next. The gunfire lasted 10 seconds, maybe less. Kane emptied his magazine into Mills, but the body kept advancing, jerking with each impact like a puppet on strings. Behind him, the others poured through the door, faces slack, eyes clouded but aware. Trapped souls screaming from inside prisons of flesh. Harper fired controlled bursts, dropping 3 figures. They hit the ground, twitched once, then pushed themselves up with movements that bent joints wrong. Morera backed into the corner, rosary wrapped around his knuckles, muttering prayers that couldn't drown out the heartbeat pulsing through the walls. Sparks collapsed, hands still clamped over his ears, blood seeping between his fingers. The transmission had pierced through whatever mental barrier he'd been holding. His mouth opened, and that sound came out, not his voice. The layered voices from the jungle, speaking through him in syllables that hurt to hear. Dr. Rojas grabbed my arm, face pale. "We need to get him out of here. If the transmission takes full hold, he'll lead them right to us." "There is no us anymore," one of the privates said flatly. He lowered his rifle, eyes glazing. "Don't you hear it? They're calling us home." Kane spun, weapon raised. "Private, stand down." But the private just smiled, dropped his weapon, and walked toward Mills. The infected parted, letting him through like he'd always belonged. He turned back once, that terrible smile still fixed on his face, then disappeared into the fog beyond the door. "Seal it!" Kane roared. "Now!" We slammed the inner security door, a reinforced steel barrier designed to withstand explosives. It shut with a hydraulic hiss, cutting off the infected. But the heartbeat continued, vibrating through metal, through concrete, through bone. And underneath, Sparks kept speaking in that chorus of voices, words almost forming now. Kane grabbed him by the vest, shaking hard. "Corporal, report. Give me a status report." Sparks' eyes rolled back, then forward, focusing on Kane with an expression that wasn't quite human anymore. "The source isn't the mound. The mound is just amplification. The source is beneath, miles beneath, something old, something waiting." "Waiting for what?" Dr. Rojas asked, voice tight. Sparks' head tilted, neck bending at an angle that made my stomach turn. "For us. It's been calling for decades. Every military installation within 500 miles, every research station, every village sending the signal, waiting for enough minds to open the door." Kane released him, face hard. "What door?" But Sparks just laughed, a broken sound that overlapped with dozens of other voices. Then his eyes cleared for just a moment, the real Sparks surfacing. "Sir, kill me, please, before it uses me to..." The transmission surged, and Sparks seized, body arching. When he straightened, the awareness was gone. Just that terrible smile and the voices pouring from his throat. Kane raised his sidearm, hand steady despite everything. One shot, clean. Sparks dropped, the voices cutting off mid-syllable. Silence hit us like a physical blow. Then the pounding started. Dozens of fists hammering against the security door, rhythmic and relentless. The metal groaned, but held. For now. "How long?" Kane asked, voice flat. Harper checked the door mechanism. Doors rated for 24 hours under sustained assault, but that assumes normal force. These things... He trailed off, watching the metal begin to buckle. 6 hours, Moreira said quietly. Maybe less. Kane surveyed our remaining group. 5 of us now. Him, me, Moreira, Harper, and Dr. Rojas, against 30-plus infected soldiers and whatever else lurked in that jungle. The math didn't work. It never had. Rojas, Kane said. You mentioned fire. Elaborate. She swallowed hard, pulling herself together. The organism, whatever it is, uses biological matter as nodes. The bones, the bodies, they're all connected through the mycelial network in the soil. Like a fungal colony, fire would disrupt the connections, potentially sever the transmission at its source. The mound, I said. She nodded. If we destroy it completely, burn it to ash, we might break the signal's hold on the infected. Kane's jaw worked. Might. It's all we have. He was quiet for a long moment, listening to the pounding on the door, to the heartbeat that had become the rhythm of our prison. Finally, he looked at each of us in turn. There's an equipment shed on the east perimeter. Contains flamethrowers, thermite charges, everything we'd need. It's 50 meters from this position, through open ground, currently occupied by hostile forces. Suicide run, Harper said bluntly. Yes, Kane agreed. But if even one of us reaches those supplies and gets to the clearing, we have a chance. A small chance, but more than we have sitting here. Moreira crossed himself. I'll go. I know the jungle. I can find the clearing in the dark. No, Kane said. You're our guide. If the rest of us fall, you're the only one who can navigate back to civilization and warn them. He looked at Harper. You're our best shot. You provide cover from the tower if we can reach it. Harper nodded, face grim. Kane turned to me and Dr. Rojas. You two make the supply run. I'll draw their attention, give you an opening. Sir, I started. That's an order, soldier. The pounding intensified. Cracks appeared in the door's weld points. We didn't have time to argue. Kane moved to the door controls, hand hovering over the release. On my mark, you run. Don't look back. Don't stop. Clear. We readied ourselves. Harper positioned at the window, rifle aimed at the tower. Dr. Rojas checked her sidearm with shaking hands. Moreira muttered one final prayer. I gripped my rifle and tried not to think about Mill's face, about that trapped awareness screaming silently. Mark, Kane said and hit the release. The door opened and hell poured through. Infected surged forward, but Kane was already moving, firing full auto, drawing them toward him. He screamed, a wordless roar of defiance that cut through the heartbeat. They converged on him like moths to flame. We ran, boots hammering metal grating, lungs burning, the fog thick around us. Harper's rifle cracked from somewhere behind, precise shots dropping infected that turned our way. But there were so many, too many. An infected soldier lunged from the fog. I fired point blank, saw the recognition in its eyes as it fell. Someone I'd shared rations with, someone whose name I couldn't remember through the panic. Dr. Rojas stumbled. I grabbed her, hauling her forward. The equipment shed emerged from the fog, door hanging open. We crashed through, slamming it behind us. Inside, racks of weapons, ammunition, and there, mounted on the wall, 2 flamethrower units and a crate of thermite charges. Help me, Dr. Rojas gasped, pulling a flamethrower down. Her hands fumbled with the straps. I grabbed the second unit, muscle memory taking over. Fuel tank secured, ignition system checked, pressure valve open. The weight settled across my shoulders, familiar and terrifying. Outside, gunfire continued. Kane was still fighting, still buying us time. We loaded thermite charges into our vests, as many as we could carry. Dr. Rojas found a demolition pack, timer already attached. For the mound, she said, in case the fire isn't enough. I nodded, unable to speak. My throat was too tight. We were going back out there, into the fog, into the infected, towards something ancient and hungry that had been calling for decades. The door shuddered. They'd found us. Dr. Rojas met my eyes, and I saw the same terror I felt reflected there. But underneath, something else. Determination. We'd heard the transmission. We'd felt it pulling at our minds, but we hadn't answered. Not yet. "For Mills," she said quietly. "For all of them," I replied. We opened the door and became fire. The flamethrowers roared, twin streams of liquid flame cutting through the fog. Infected ignited instantly, their bodies going up like kindling. They didn't scream, just burned, that terrible awareness finally fading from their eyes as the flames consumed them. We pushed forward, back to back, sweeping arcs of fire. The fog retreated from the heat, pulling away to reveal the full horror of what the base had become. Bodies everywhere, some still moving, crawling with limbs that no longer worked right. The walls were covered in that same geometric pattern from the poles in the clearing, carved into metal with bare hands, fingers worn to bone. Harper's voice crackled in my earpiece, weak but alive. "Tower secured. You've got a clear path west. Kane's down, but he took at least 15 with him." My chest tightened, but there was no time to process grief. We moved west, following the path Kane had cleared with his life. The jungle waited beyond the razor wire, fog thick between the trees, pulsing with that heartbeat rhythm. Moreira's voice came through comms. "I'm tracking you. When you hit the jungle, follow the red marker lights. I'm laying them from the tower position." "Copy," I said, throat raw from smoke and fear. We reached the perimeter fence. The gate hung open, torn from its hinges. Beyond, darkness and fog and the jungle that had been silent for days. Dr. Rojas reloaded her flamethrower, hands steady now, shock overriding fear. I checked my fuel gauge. Half tank, enough to reach the clearing, maybe enough to burn it. "Stay close," I told her. "If we get separated—" "We won't," she interrupted, "because if we do, we're both dead." Fair point. We stepped into the jungle, and the transmission hit us like a wave. Stronger here, so much stronger. Words almost forming in our heads. Promises of peace, of rest, of finally understanding. I bit down hard on my tongue, using pain to anchor myself. Dr. Rojas whimpered, but kept moving. The red markers appeared, chemical light sticks hanging from branches, leading deeper into the green hell. We followed, flamethrowers ready, every shadow a potential threat, but nothing attacked. The jungle remained empty, watching, waiting. After what felt like hours, but was probably minutes, we reached the clearing. The poles stood as before, but now they pulsed with bioluminescence, glowing pale blue in the darkness. The mound had grown, twice the size, covered in those same geometric patterns. And the bones, God, there were so many bones now, scattered around the base, fresh and gleaming. Dr. Rojas knelt, examining them with her light. "These are from our men. From tonight, the organism works fast, converts organic matter into building material." "For what?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. She pointed at the mound. "For that. It's not a mound, it's a structure, a gateway." I looked closer and saw she was right. The stones on top weren't random. They formed an opening, a hole leading down into darkness, and from that hole came the heartbeat, so loud now it made my vision swim. "Thermite charges," Dr. Rojas said, "all business. We plant them around the perimeter, set the timer, then burn everything above ground. The combination should collapse the structure and seal the opening." "And if it doesn't?" She met my eyes. "Then we were already dead." We moved fast, planting charges at the base of each pole, around the mound, anywhere the ground looked disturbed. The transmission screamed in our heads now, no longer calling but demanding. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped a charge. Dr. Rojas caught it, finished the placement, her face set in grim concentration. As I placed the final charge, movement caught my eye. Figures emerging from the jungle. Not infected soldiers. These were different. Taller, thinner, with proportions that weren't quite human. The source material for those bones. The things that had been changed so completely they weren't people anymore. Just vessels for the transmission. "We're out of time," Dr. Rojas said, setting the demolition timer. 60 seconds. "That's not enough time to get clear," I said. "I know." We stood there, flamethrowers raised as the figures closed in. 20, maybe 30 of them, moving with that same jerking puppet motion. But their faces, twisted and wrong, still held recognition, still held the memory of who they'd been. One of them was Mills, or what Mills had become. His body stretched, bones elongated, skin pulled tight over a frame that stood nearly 8 feet tall, but his eyes, clouded and distant, still held that trapped awareness. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Then I pulled the trigger, and we became fire once more. The flamethrowers roared, consuming the figures, consuming the poles, consuming everything. The heat was immense, driving us back, but we kept firing, kept burning until our fuel tanks ran dry. The timer hit 0. The thermite charges detonated in sequence, white-hot chemical fire that made our flames look like candles. The poles collapsed, the mound cracked, and the hole, that terrible opening into darkness, sealed shut with molten earth. The heartbeat stopped. Just stopped. Silence crashed over us, so sudden and complete it felt like deafness. The figures that were still moving collapsed. Strings finally cut. The fog began to lift, pulled away by morning wind we hadn't felt in days. Dr. Rojas dropped to her knees, sobbing. I stood there, numb, watching the clearing burn. We'd done it. We'd actually done it. Harper's voice crackled through comms, shaky with relief. "I see smoke. You guys alive?" "Yeah," I managed. "We're alive. Morera's on his way to you." TOC finally broke through the interference. Extraction inbound, ETA 30 minutes. 30 minutes. An eternity in this place. But as I looked around the burning clearing at the collapsed structure in the sealed hole, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. The transmission was broken. The infected were free. Or at least, their suffering had ended. Morera crashed through the undergrowth, face streaked with tears and soot. He stared at the ruins, crossed himself 3 times, then pulled us both into a crushing embrace. "You did it. You actually did it." "Kane did it," I said quietly. "He bought us the time." We stood there, 3 survivors in a burning jungle, waiting for the helicopters that would take us away from this nightmare. But even as the rotors grew loud overhead, even as we lifted away from the canopy, I knew something true and terrible. We hadn't destroyed the transmission. We'd only severed one node, one connection in a network that spanned miles, maybe hundreds of miles. Beneath the Amazon, something old and patient still waited, still called. And one day, someone else would answer. But that day wasn't today. Today we'd won. We'd survived. And that would have to be enough. The debriefing lasted 3 weeks. They kept us separated, rotating interrogators, asking the same questions in different ways. What did you see? What did you hear? Are you experiencing any unusual symptoms? I told them everything multiple times until the words felt mechanical. Dr. Rojas did the same. So did Morera and Harper. But I could see it in their eyes, in the way they looked at us. They didn't believe. Or worse, they believed but didn't want to. The official report labeled it a hostile engagement with unknown guerrilla forces. Chemical weapons were theorized. Mass hallucination from jungle toxins. The bodies we'd lost were listed as combat casualties, honored and buried with full military honors. The base was evacuated, dismantled, erased from every map. Operation Night Harvest never existed. We'd never been there. They offered us medical discharges, pension packages, NDAS thick as phone books. We signed. What choice did we have? Who would believe us anyway? I went home to a world that had moved on without me, to streets that felt too quiet, to nights where silence was worse than any jungle noise. But the transmission followed me. Not the heartbeat, not the voices, just the memory of them, burned so deep I couldn't dig them out. I'd hear a rhythm in traffic, in rainfall, in my own pulse, and my chest would tighten. I'd see patterns in tile floors, in wallpaper, in the way branches crossed overhead, and my vision would swim. The doctors called it PTSD, prescribed pills that dulled the edges but never touched the core. 3 months after my discharge, Dr. Sofia Rojas reached out. A simple message. Coffee, with coordinates to a diner 200 miles from my apartment. I almost didn't go, almost convinced myself to let it die, to bury it with everything else. But something in those coordinates, that specific invitation, pulled at me. I went. She looked different, thinner, harder, with shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. We sat in a corner booth, coffee going cold between us, speaking in low voices that wouldn't carry. She'd been researching, obsessively, using her university credentials to access geological surveys, military archives, satellite imagery. What she'd found made my hands shake. "There are 17 sites," she said quietly, spreading printouts across the table. 17 confirmed locations across the Amazon basin where similar structures have been identified. Mounds, geometric markers, all positioned above massive underground cavities, natural caverns that extend miles deep. I stared at the images. Different locations, but the patterns were identical. The same poles, the same arrangements, the same openings leading down into darkness. "How long have they been there?" "Some are recent, decades old at most. Others?" She pulled out a carbon dating report. "This one near the Peruvian border dates back over 2,000 years. They've been there longer than recorded history, longer than the tribes that live there now." My stomach dropped. "Then what we destroyed was one node in a network that spans the entire basin, maybe further. We cut off one finger, but the hand is still reaching." She leaned forward, voice intense. "I've been tracking reports. Military installations reporting equipment failures, research stations losing personnel, villages evacuating for no documented reason, all within proximity to these sites. The transmission is still active, still calling." "Have you told anyone?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Who would listen? The military buried it. Academic journals won't touch anything without peer review, and how do I peer review this? She laughed bitterly. "I sound insane. I know I sound insane, but the data doesn't lie." I believed her. God help me, every word, because I'd felt it. Stood in that clearing and understood, on some primal level, that we'd stumbled onto something vast, something old, something that had been waiting beneath the earth long before humans walked above it. "What do you want from me?" I asked quietly. She met my eyes. "Help. Morera's in. Harper didn't make it. Pills, 6 weeks ago. But Morera's been tracking the sites from Brazil. He's got contacts, people who know the jungle. We're planning an expedition. Private funding, small team. We go in quiet, document everything, and figure out how to shut this down permanently." "You want to go back?" I said, voice flat. "I want to finish what Kane started." She pulled out a photo, laid it on the table. Captain Elias Kane in dress uniform, medals gleaming, face set in that iron discipline. "He died buying us time to seal one site. The least we can do is make sure it wasn't for nothing." I looked at Kane's face, at the man who'd held the line when everything fell apart. Then I looked at Dr. Rojas, at the desperation and determination burning in her eyes. I thought about Mills, about Torres, about Sparks, and all the others who'd answered that terrible call. About the private who'd smiled and walked into the fog. About 37 men who'd gone into the jungle and 3 who'd come back out. "When?" I asked. Relief flooded her face. 2 months. We need time to prepare, to gather equipment, to be ready for what we'll find. We spent the next 8 weeks training. Moreira joined us in the States, bringing detailed maps he'd drawn from memory and local reports. We studied the sites, looking for patterns. The 17 confirmed locations formed a rough sprawl, all equidistant from a central point deep in uncharted territory. None of the sites were easily accessible. Most required weeks of jungle travel. The central point was marked on no map, appearing only as blank space on satellite imagery. "That's where we go," Moreira said, tapping the center. "The source. We destroy that, maybe we destroy them all." Maybe. That word carried so much weight, because we didn't know what we'd find there, didn't know if it could be destroyed, didn't know if we'd come back. Harper's sister contacted me a week before departure. She'd found a letter in his effects, addressed to me. I opened it with shaking hands. His handwriting was neat, precise, each word carefully chosen. The letter was short, 3 sentences that made my blood run cold. "The silence is worse than the sound. Every night I hear them calling, promising peace. By the time you read this, I'll have answered. Don't follow me." I showed Dr. Rojas. She read it twice, face pale, then carefully folded it and handed it back. "We're not following him. We're making sure no one else has to." The expedition launched in late February, just the 3 of us, traveling under tourist visas, carrying equipment hidden in camping gear. We flew into Manaus, hired a boat, and headed west along tributaries that grew narrower and darker with each passing mile. The jungle pressed close, humidity thick enough to drown in. But this time, the jungle wasn't silent. Birds called, insects screamed, monkeys howled in the canopy. Normal sounds, living sounds. It took 3 weeks to reach the coordinates. 3 weeks of cutting through undergrowth, crossing rivers, avoiding villages that might ask questions. Moreira navigated like the jungle was his home, finding paths that didn't exist on any map. Dr. Rojas documented everything, samples and measurements and observations filling notebooks. I kept watch, rifle ready, scanning for threats that might not show up until too late. The jungle changed as we approached the center point. Subtle at first. Trees grew taller, thicker, with bark that felt wrong under your hand. The air tasted metallic, like copper and ozone. Animal sounds faded, replaced by that oppressive stillness I remembered from the base. My chest tightened. We were close. On the 22nd day, we found it. Not a clearing like before, but a massive sinkhole, easily 200 meters across, dropping straight down into darkness. Vines covered the edges, thick as anchor cables, hanging into the depths. And around the perimeter, carved into stone that predated the jungle itself, were those same geometric patterns. Thousands of them, spiraling down into the pit. Dr. Rojas set up equipment, measuring depth with sonar. The readings kept going, deeper and deeper, until the equipment maxed out at 5 kilometers. "There's a structure down there," she said, voice shaking. "Not natural. Constructed. Something massive." Moreira stared into the pit, face grim. "This is where they come from. The transmissions, the calls. This is the heart." I approached the edge, looking down. The darkness wasn't empty. Faint bioluminescence pulsed far below, that same pale blue glow from the mound. And beneath it, deeper still, something moved, something vast. I could feel it watching us, aware of our presence, waiting to see what we'd do. "We need to collapse it," Dr. Rojas said. "Bring down the walls, seal the entrance. We've got enough explosives to—" A sound interrupted her, not the heartbeat, not the voices, just a low rumble that came from deep in the earth, vibrating up through stone. Through our bones, the ground trembled. Rocks skittered over the edge, disappearing into darkness. The bioluminescence flared brighter. "It knows we're here," Moreira whispered. We worked fast, placing charges around the sinkhole's perimeter, setting timers, our hands shaking with urgency and fear. The rumbling continued, growing stronger. Cracks appeared in the stone, spreading like veins. Something was rising, coming up to meet us. Dr. Rojas finished the last charge, hands bloody from rough stone. Timers set. 15 minutes. We need to be at least a kilometer away when this goes off. We ran, crashing through undergrowth, leaping over roots, the rumbling chasing us. Behind, the jungle screamed, not animals. The trees themselves, wood splitting, earth heaving. I risked a glance back and wished I hadn't. The sinkhole was expanding, walls crumbling inward, something massive pulling itself up from the depths. I couldn't see details, just shape, just size, just the terrible understanding that we'd woken something that should have stayed sleeping. The charges detonated. Even at a kilometer away, the blast wave knocked us flat. Thunder rolled across the jungle, echoing for miles. Birds exploded from the canopy in clouds of panicked flight. Then silence, heavy, complete, absolute. We waited, not daring to breathe. Minutes passed. The silence held. Finally, Moreira stood, moving back toward the blast site. We followed, weapons ready, every nerve on edge. The sinkhole was gone, collapsed completely, filled with millions of tons of earth and stone. The geometric patterns were buried, erased. The ground was still, no longer trembling. And the air, the metallic taste was fading, replaced by normal jungle humidity. "Did we do it?" I asked quietly. Dr. Rojas pulled out her equipment, scanning for electromagnetic activity. The readings were flat, normal background radiation, nothing else. No transmission, no signal, no call pulling at our minds. She looked up, tears streaking through the dirt on her face. "It's gone." We actually did it. Moreira dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead to the ground, whispering thanks to gods I didn't know. I just stood there, numb, trying to process that it was over. Really over. We made camp that night near the collapsed site, taking turns on watch. But nothing came. The jungle remained alive, normal, indifferent to what we'd done. By morning, vines were already creeping over the disturbed earth, beginning the slow work of reclaiming what we'd destroyed. The journey back took 2 weeks. We moved faster, without the weight of dread, without the constant anticipation of attack. When we reached civilization, Dr. Rojas made calls, quiet conversations with people who'd funded our expedition. Within a month, coordinated strikes hit the other 16 sites. Sealed, collapsed, buried under tons of earth and concrete. The official story was geological instability, preventative measures against sinkhole formation. No one questioned it too deeply. 6 months later, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a recording, old reel-to-reel tape in a military surplus case. A note attached, found in Soviet archives, dated 1952. "You should hear this." I played it. Through the static and age, I heard voices speaking Russian. A debriefing. Soldiers describing a transmission they'd encountered in Siberia. A heartbeat sound. Geometric patterns carved in permafrost. Comrades who walked into the ice and didn't return. Then silence. A note in the margin, translated, "Site sealed with nuclear charge. Recommend all similar anomalies receive same treatment." My hands shook as I turned off the player. They'd found them too. Different locations, different times, but the same phenomenon. And they'd buried it, just like we had. Just like countless others probably had throughout history. Each generation stumbling onto these sites, sealing them, and hoping they'd stay sealed. But hoping wasn't enough. Because as I sat there, tape recorder silent, I realized something that made my blood run cold. We'd found 17 sites in the Amazon. The Soviets had found sites in Siberia. How many more were there? How many remained undiscovered, calling silently from beneath mountains, beneath oceans, beneath cities built unknowingly on top of them? Dr. Rojas called that night. She'd received the same tape. "We need to keep looking," she said. "Document every site. Seal every opening." It's not over. She was right. It wasn't over. Maybe it never would be. But that day in the jungle, when the charges went off and the ground stopped trembling, we'd won a battle. We'd silenced one call in a chorus that spanned the planet. And sometimes that's all you can do. Fight the battles you can reach. Seal the doors you can find. Keep the darkness at bay, one sight at a time. I think about Cain sometimes, about his iron discipline, his willingness to buy us time with his life. I think about Mills, trapped and aware as something else wore his skin. I think about Harper, who couldn't live with the silence after hearing that sound. They deserved better than to be forgotten, to have their sacrifice buried in classified files and false reports. So I'm telling you now, this story, these events, not as entertainment, not as fiction, but as warning. Because somewhere, right now, beneath your feet, or across the ocean, or deep in some jungle not yet mapped, they're still there, still waiting, still calling. The transmission isn't one thing, it's many things, connected through networks older than our species, operating on timescales we can barely comprehend. And if you ever find yourself in a place that's too quiet, where the patterns on the walls hurt to look at, where the ground hums with rhythms that match your heartbeat, walk away. Don't investigate. Don't try to understand. Just leave and seal it behind you if you can, because some doors should never be opened. Some calls should never be answered. We survived Operation Night Harvest. 3 out of 37. Those aren't good odds. But we lived to fight again, to find and seal the source, to stop the transmission at its heart. That has to count for something. That has to mean something. The jungle is quiet now where we fought. Normal quiet, full of life and sound and chaos. The mound is gone. The opening is sealed. The bones are buried under earth that will hold them for centuries. We did that. We made it right, as much as it could be made right. But late at night, when the world goes still, I sometimes hear it, faint, distant, like a memory that won't fade. The heartbeat, the voices, not calling me anymore, just reminding me they're out there, waiting, patient. And I wonder how many others hear it too, how many are listening right now, in the quiet hours before dawn, wondering if they should answer. Don't answer, please. Whatever you hear, whatever it promises, don't answer. Learn from Mills, from Torres, from Harper. Learn from the 34 men who didn't come home. The silence after the transmission ends is hard to bear, but it's better than the alternative. Better than becoming a vessel for something that wears your face and speaks with your voice, but isn't you anymore. This is my testimony, my warning, my memorial to the men who died in a jungle hell that officially never existed. Captain Elias Kane, Sergeant Luis Moreira made it out with me, but carries scars I can't see. Dr. Sofia Rojas fights this battle in her own way, hunting these sites with the dedication of someone who understands what's at stake. Private Neil Harper, who found peace the only way he could, and Corporal Andrew Dalton, Sparks, who gave us the information we needed even as it destroyed him. Remember them, remember what they fought. And if you're watching this in the quiet hours, if you're alone and the silence feels heavy, know that you're not imagining it. The transmission is real, the sites are real, and somewhere, people are fighting to keep you safe from things you'll never know existed. We're still out here, still sealing doors, still fighting battles in jungles and deserts and frozen wastes. Not for glory or recognition, not for anything that will ever appear in history books. Just to make sure that when you lie down at night, the silence stays silent. That the heartbeat you hear is only your own. Operation Night Harvest ended in 1967, but the war continues, and it will continue long after I'm gone. Because some things are older than us, stronger than us, patient beyond measure. All we can do is hold the line, buy time, and hope that somewhere down the centuries someone finds a way to end this permanently. Until then, we watch, we listen, we seal the doors, and we survive. That's all I've got. That's the truth of what happened in Grid 97, in a base that never existed during an operation that was never authorized. 37 men went in, 3 came out. The numbers speak for themselves. If you're still watching, if you made it this far, do me a favor. Look up Operation Night Harvest. You won't find it. It's been scrubbed, buried, classified beyond black. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. That doesn't mean the threat is gone. Keep your eyes open. Stay aware. And if you ever encounter something that feels like what I've described, report it. Tell someone. Don't let it spread. We can't fight what we don't acknowledge. And the first step in winning this war is admitting it exists. The transmission is real. The sites are real. And they're waiting for the next person to stumble across them, to hear that heartbeat, to feel that pull. Don't be that person. Learn from our mistakes. Live your life. Stay safe. And whatever you do, don't answer the call.